I want to start today by asking you to visualize something. If I say the word jazz, and I ask you to picture a scene in a club, say, in the 1940s or 50s, what's the very first image that hit your brain? Be honest.
Usually. It's chaos.
Chaos, right.
Controlled chaos, maybe, but chaos. It's a saxophone player just, sweating through his suit, veins popping out of his neck.
Drummer playing a million miles an hour.
It's a flurry of notes that feels like they're trying to solve a math equation at high speed.
Exactly. We are conditioned to think of modern jazz, especially that bebop era, as this high-speed, high-complexity musical gymnastics. It's intellectual, it's frantic, and it is loud. But today, we are looking at a stack of research that flips that entire image on its head. We're doing a deep dive into a man who looked at all that noise, all that virtuosity, and decided the most powerful thing he could play was, well, nothing at all.
The architect of silence.
We are talking about Ahmad Jamal, and if you're listening to this thinking, I'm not a jazz nerd, I don't know if this is for me, let me ask you this. Do you like Miles Davis?
Because without Jamal, there is no kind of blue.
Do you like hip-hop? Because some of the greatest producers in history built their foundations on samples of his piano chords.
He is arguably the most influential pianist that the general public overlooks. I mean, he didn't just play the piano, he completely redefined the geography of the trio format. He changed how musicians listen to each other.
We have a fantastic column to guide us today titled Ahmad Jamal, Innovator of the Piano Trio, published by MMR just recently in November 2025. It's a really comprehensive look, not just at his biography, but at his philosophy.
And that is where I want to focus.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just recounting dates and album titles. We want to understand this concept of space.
Right. How does a musician gain the confidence to just stop playing in the middle of a song? And how did that specific decision to embrace minimalism change the entire trajectory of 20th century music?
It's a fascinating psychological question as much as a musical one. So let's rewind the tape. Before he's the architect of space, before he's an icon, he's just a kid. Where does this story start?
It starts in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Frederick Russell Jones is born there on July 2, 1925.
And the source material makes a big point about the geography here. Pittsburgh. I feel like when we talk about jazz history, we always talk New York, Chicago, maybe New Orleans.
Pittsburgh gets left off the map.
Yeah, why does the article highlight it as being so crucial?
That is a huge oversight in general history. I mean, in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, Pittsburgh was an absolute pressure cooker for talent.
Oh, really?
It was an industrial hub, there was money flowing, and there was a vibrant club scene. You have to remember, Art Blakey, Billy Strayhorn, Kenny Clark, Earl Hines, they all came out of that Steel City scene.
So it wasn't a musical desert?
Far from it. It was a university of the street. So young Frederick is just immersed in this high-level musicianship from day one. He starts formal piano lessons at 5 years old, encouraged by his mother.
And it wasn't just dabbling.
He was serious.
How serious are we talking? Yeah.
By the time he's a teenager, he's already gigging. He's playing professional slots in local dance bands. He's absorbing the Great American Songbook. He's learning about rhythm. By 1944, he's 19 years old, a professional musician, and he's ready to take on the world.
But then, obviously, the world intervenes.
World War II.
Right. He joins the U.S. Army.
And usually in these artist biographies, the military service is treated as like a gap year. The narrative is usually he stopped playing to serve his country, then came back and picked up where he left off.
Yeah, it's a footnote.
But the research here suggests that for Jamal, the Army was actually a critical part of his musical education.
How so?
It was an incubator. He wasn't just digging trenches or peeling potatoes. He was playing in the military orchestra.
Okay.
And you have to think about what that environment does to a musician. It forces discipline. But more importantly, it gave him constant repetition in understanding how a group functions.
He's learning the mechanics of the ensemble.
Exactly. He's experimenting with improvisation, but he's doing it within a structured discipline unit. He's learning that the individual has to serve the whole.
I see.
So when he gets out and moves to New York in 1947, he's not a rookie. He has a very specific sound in his head.
And this is where the timeline gets really interesting to me, because the late 40s and early 50s, that is the peak of the big band era, isn't it? Or at least the loud, brassy tail end of it.
Oh, absolutely. It was the era of more instruments, more volume, more complexity. Bebop is exploding, which is just frantic.
And here comes Jamal, releasing his first album as a leader, New Talent, in 1951. And what does he do?
He goes the complete opposite direction. No horns, no big brass sections.
Yeah.
It's a tight three-person unit, piano, bass, drums.
He's zigging while the rest of the industry's zagging. That seems incredibly risky.
It was. He was betting on intimacy. He was betting that people wanted to lean in and listen rather than be blown backward by a wall of sound.
But the real explosion, the moment where this bet pays off, doesn't happen until 1958. We have to talk about At the Pershing.
At the Pershing. But not for me. This is the turning point.
Set the scene for us. This is a live album, right?
Recorded live at the Pershing Lounge in Chicago. And you have to understand, in the jazz world, live albums are usually for the hardcore fans.
Right, they can be messy.
They're raw, they're messy, the audio quality varies. But this record, it became a phenomenon. It didn't just stay on the jazz charts, it crossed over to the pop charts.
That feels impossible for a jazz trio album.
It stayed on the Billboard charts for over 2 years.
2 years.
Unheard of.
So why? What was it about this specific recording? The driver of that success was the track Poinciana.
A masterpiece.
I want to drill down on this because the MMR column highlights Poinciana as the perfect case study for Jamal's genius. If we are listening to this track right now, what are we actually hearing that made it so revolutionary?
Well, if you've heard it, even in the background at a coffee shop, you know it has this infectious, almost hypnotic groove.
But structurally, it's doing three very radical things. First, there's the use of space, which is our theme today. Jamal isn't trying to dazzle you with speed. He plays a phrase, and then he just lets it hang there.
He uses the void?
He uses the void to create tension. It's almost like he's daring the audience to wait.
That's a great way to put it. It's an invitation.
That's exactly it. He trusts the audience to fill in the blank. Second, there's the minimalism. He uses repetition. Instead of playing 100 different variations of the melody to show off how many scales he knows,
He finds a theme and locks in.
he finds a rhythmic theme and he locks into it. He builds the song rhythmically rather than melodically.
Which creates that trance-like quality. It sounds modern. It sounds like a loop.
Right. But he couldn't do that alone. And this is the third thing, and maybe the most important factor in his success, the band. We have to give credit to Israel Crosby on bass and Vernel Fournier on drums.
The source material is very specific about this. It calls them an interactive trio. That sounds like a marketing term, but what does it mean in practice? Think about the standard jazz format before this. You had the star, the pianist or the trumpet player, standing at the front in the spotlight.
And the rhythm section behind him.
And behind him, you had the rhythm section.
Yeah.
Their job was to keep time and stay out of the way. They were musical wallpaper, support staff.
Keep the beat, don't step on the solo.
Exactly. Jamal didn't view it that way. He treated Crosby and Fournier as equal voices. In Poinciana, the drums aren't just keeping a beat. They're playing a specific melodic pattern.
The beat is the hook.
Vernel Fournier uses this New Orleans beat on the drums that is actually the hook of the song. And the bass isn't just walking, it's interacting with the piano lines.
So it's a conversation.
It's a democracy, a cohesive unit where everyone is driving the car.
That distinction is so key. It shifts the energy from performance to interplay.
Yeah.
So we've got the hit album. Everyone loves it. But I want to get a little technical for a second. The breakdown in our notes lists 4 pillars of Jamal's style. We've touched on them, but let's explicitly define them because this is the toolkit he gave to the jazz world.
Let's walk through them.
Pillar 1, the art of space. The notes reference a Japanese term here, ma.
Yes, ma. It's a fascinating concept from Japanese aesthetics. It refers to negative space. In visual art, it's the empty white canvas that defines the painted object. In music,
It's the silence.
it's the silence that defines the sound. Jamal understood that music happens between the notes.
It's the pause that gives the note meaning. Like in a speech, if I don't pause, the words lose their weight.
Precisely. If I talk without stopping member breath, you tune out. It becomes a drone. But if I stop,
You listen. You lean in.
and Jamal would play a beautiful line and then just stop.
Yeah.
That silence allowed the drums and bass to pop through. It created a call and response texture within the band itself.
Which leads right into pillar 2, the minimal approach.
This is about checking your ego at the door. A lot of jazz at the time, specifically the bebop movement, was about harmonic complexity. It was competitive.
It was a sport.
How many chord changes can I fit into this bar? How fast can I play this scale?
It was a flex.
A total flex. Look at what I can do. Jamal went the other way. Simple phrases. Use the necessary flourish, but then strip everything else away. Let the melody stand naked.
That feels incredibly vulnerable. You can't hide behind a wall of notes if you're playing minimally.
You can't. If you play one note, it has to be the perfect note. There's no room for error. It requires a much higher level of intentionality.
Pillar 3 we covered, the interactive trio. But Pillar 4 is where I need you to help me out. Modal harmony.
Ah, yes.
This gets thrown around a lot in jazz circles. Oh, it's very modal. But for the listener who didn't go to music school, or for me, frankly, what are we actually talking about here?
Okay, the best way to visualize this is to think about the environment you're moving through. Bebop, the style that dominated the 40s, is like an obstacle course.
Okay, I'm picturing tires and climbing walls.
Think of it harmonically. The chords are changing every 2 seconds. You have to navigate this complex maze of harmony, constantly resolving, constantly moving. You can't stay in one spot.
It sounds stressful.
It's frantic, it's intellectual, it's fast, high stress. Modal harmony is like an open field.
I like that image much better.
You stay on one scale or one mode for a long period of time. You aren't forced to change direction constantly. You can just hang out in that sound.
So we have more room to breathe.
It gives you space to explore melody and texture because you aren't doing the math of the chord changes every second. It's more chill. It's definitely cooler.
It creates a vibe.
It creates a vibe, a flexible, open sound. It allows you to focus on the mood rather than the math. And this is the perfect segue because that specific sound, that cool, is what attracted the biggest shark in the ocean.
Miles Davis.
Yeah.
This is the part of the research that really surprised me. When you think of cool jazz, you think of Miles Davis. That is his brand.
Yeah.
He's the icon of cool. But the source material suggests that Miles was basically Ahmad Jamal's biggest fanboy.
Fanboy isn't even too strong a word. Miles didn't just admire Jamal, he studied him. He was obsessed.
Really?
Obsessed.
There are stories of Miles telling his piano player, the legendary Red Garland, play it like Ahmad.
Play it like Ahmad. That is wild, but Miles is a trumpet player. Jamal is a piano player. How does that influence translate across instruments?
It goes back to that concept of space we just talked about. In the late 50s, Miles was trying to move away from the frantic energy of bebop, too. He was looking for a new sound. When he heard Jamal using that silence,
a light bulb went off.
He realized he could do the same thing on the trumpet.
So when we listen to Kind of Blue, which is the best-selling jazz album of all time, and we hear those mournful, spacious trumpet lines.
That is Jamal's DNA. Miles adopted that use of silence, but it went deeper than just the soloing. It was the arrangement. The source notes that the minimalist presentation of themes in Miles's famous quintet was a direct reflection of Jamal's work.
He wanted his whole band to sound like that. He wanted his rhythm section to have that lightness, that bounce, that interplay that he heard in Jamal's band.
It's fascinating to think that without Ahmad Jamal providing the architectural drawings, we might not have the Miles Davis we know today.
It's not an exaggeration. Jamal built the house, Miles moved in and decorated it, but Jamal provided the blueprint for the cool aesthetic and for modal jazz itself.
So Jamal changes the 50s. He influences Miles. But one thing the article makes clear is that he didn't stop there. He wasn't a nostalgia act who just played Poinciana for the next 40 years.
Not at all. He was an evolutionist. He refused to stay in one box.
We should mention the name change here.
Right.
Because it happens during this era.
Yes. He converted to Islam in the early 1950s and changed his name from Frederick Russell Jones to Ahmad Jamal. And the article points out this wasn't just a private choice. In the context of the 1950s, a black artist publicly claiming an Islamic name.
That was a statement.
It was a huge statement. It was a symbol of cultural independence. He was claiming his own identity, just like he claimed his own space in the music.
And that international perspective seemed to seep into the music as he moved into the 60s and 70s.
He toured everywhere. Europe, Asia, the Middle East. He was soaking in global sounds. And by 1970, he releases an album called The Awakening,
which the MMR column calls his mature masterpiece.
If At the Pershing was the breakout, The Awakening is the heavy hitter. He's exploring those modal harmonies we talked about, but deeper. The dynamics are broader. It's a stunning record.
And for the younger listeners, or the listeners who grew up on 90s hip-hop,
if you listen to The Awakening, you're going to have a serious moment of deja vu.
Why is that?
Because you're going to hear about 10 different hip-hop songs. Nas, Jay-Z, Pete Rock. Everyone sampled this record, specifically the track I Love Music.
Why that record? Was it just because it was catchy?
It was because of the space. Because Jamal left so much room in the arrangement, it was ready-made for looping. It gave the rappers room to breathe.
That brings it full circle. The same silence that inspired Miles Davis inspired Nas 40 years later.
Exactly. The utility of space is universal.
And looking at the timeline, he just kept going. He was touring well into the 2000s and 2010s.
He was a giant right up until the end. He passed away in 2023 at the age of 92. But he never got stale. He was always collaborating with younger musicians, always pushing that interactive style. He never became a museum piece.
And speaking of younger musicians, let's look at the family tree. The art of space didn't die with him. Who is carrying the torch today?
It's everywhere. You can't listen to modern jazz piano without hearing Jamal, Herbie Hancock,
Huge Jamal influence.
Keith Jarrett. He took that concept of the trio as a single organism and just ran with it. Brad Meldau, Vijay Iyer, Robert Glasper, these are the titans of modern piano, and they are all standing on Ahmad Jamal's shoulders.
So anytime we see a trio on stage and they're having a conversation rather than just backing up a soloist?
That's the Jamal legacy. He redefined the format. He proved that the piano didn't have to dominate to lead. He proved that you could lead by listening.
It's amazing. We started this episode talking about jazz as noise, as this overwhelming wall of sound, and we've ended up seeing it as a conversation.
And a conversation that requires listening as much as talking. Maybe even more listening than talking.
That's the big takeaway for me. I'm sitting here looking at these notes and I'm thinking about the world we live in right now.
Which is noisy.
Incredibly noisy.
Mm-hmm.
We are living in an era of absolute saturation. Notifications, 24-hour news cycles, social media feeds that never end. It's constant input.
It's information overload. We are terrified of silence. We fill every gap.
Right. And here is Ahmad Jamal, way back in 1958, teaching us a lesson that feels more relevant today than it did then. He taught us that the most powerful thing you can do is pause.
It's true. In music, if you play every note available, you create a wall that pushes people away. It's defensive. But if you leave space, you invite the listener in.
You let them complete the thought.
You let them participate. And that applies to everything, doesn't it? Not just jazz. Think about leadership. Think about a conversation with your spouse or your kids. If you fill every second with your own voice, there's no room for anyone else.
There's no room for collaboration.
Exactly. Jamal taught us that confidence looks like silence.
Confidence looks like silence. That's going to stick with me.
It means trusting that your message is strong enough to stand with some air around it. You don't need to clutter it up to make it valid.
That is a powerful idea to sit with. He wasn't just playing piano, he was editing.
The ultimate editor, he edited in real time.
So here is a final thought for you to mull over today as you head back into the noise of your daily life. We've talked about how Jamal changed history by choosing not to play a note.
So where in your own life, your work, your relationships, your creative projects, could you create a little bit of space?
Where could you pull back, stop playing for a beat, and let the rhythm section take over?
You might find that the message gets a whole lot louder.
Absolutely. And hey, if you need a soundtrack for that reflection, go stream Poinciana. Specifically, the Bat the Pershing version.
Put on some good headphones.
Close your eyes and just listen to what Vernel Fournier is doing on those drums. You won't regret it.
Not for a second.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.